So today you got a handout for exercise 115, and we're going to depart from working on the alphabet and into the world of creating a personal logo. How many of you have taken 130 and had to do a logo in 130 already? At least a few of you. Your logo in that may or may not be what comes out of this. If you really were happy with your logo and you want to do a digital version of that, I'm okay with it. But you may find that rebranding yourself in kind of a new way with the access to the computers and stuff that you have might not be a bad strategy in terms of moving forward. Next week, as you probably are well aware, is spring break, which is fantastic. That means you don't have to come here either Monday or Wednesday nights, and neither do I. So that's a good thing, right? I've done my best to make sure that you actually have that time off and can actually enjoy that time off. So we don't have anything due right when you get back, which is also a good thing. Be aware that you can't just completely forget all the skills that you learn while you go away for a week, but at the same time try to enjoy your time off and take a time to relax and enjoy yourself a little bit. That's one of the best things about being in school, is that you actually get breaks. Or at least maybe you can concentrate on your job or something like that. It also marks roughly the halfway through point of the semester. Today is lecture 115 and exercise 115, which basically means that we're halfway there. We'll end with exercise 130 or 131, something like that, which puts us basically right about halfway. So it's a really good time to have spring break and to kind of regroup and then push towards the final at the end of the semester. So today we're going to talk about logo design. And I kind of want to walk through some of the basics of it and then really show you a lot of examples today, because I think examples are going to help more than me actually talking the technical, how do you create it or whatever. We will spend time in Illustrator today, and I'll show you a bunch of new tools, mostly the Pathfinder tool set, that will help you in creating your logos from the pen tool shapes and from pre-made shapes. So an effective logo is by its nature distinctive. And I think that's probably the most important thing. Logos are all about brand recognition. And so if I were to ask you, what is a logo that jumps to mind immediately? McDonald's. The golden arches. That's a pretty obvious one. What else? Nike. Nike. I'll concentrate on Nike in this lecture a fair amount. What else? Apple, right? So those three, McDonald's, Nike, Apple, those are all very iconic, classic logos that have been around for a long time that define a particular brand. And so when I ask you, or when you have to sit down and create a logo for yourself, you want to think about the same kind of thing. What is it that defines you? How do you brand yourself into that? And how does that carry through the course of time? And so it is definitely a distinctive thing. It's probably appropriate for whatever your particular design or whatever your particular company does or whatever you do. It's probably practical and relatively straightforward. It's probably very graphic in nature. The three examples that you talked about already, the golden arches. Welcome back. You want to sit and do this again? It's probably there. It's probably simple in form. Nike, very simple. Golden arches, very simple. Apple logo, very simple, right? But at the same time, they work really well to define that particular brand. It may convey some kind of a message as well. So here's another set of logos. Obviously, you picked out some examples. I'll touch on some of them. I actually don't have a McDonald's logo anywhere in here, but it's a good one, right? Shell Gas has nothing to do with gas, but it has everything to do with the name of the company. So Shell and a shell. Kind of makes sense. Volkswagen is a kind of more of a text-based logo, but again, very iconic, classic logo. All the car companies have classic logos, right? And it doesn't matter, you could be Chevrolet, you could be, I don't know, Tesla. You could be, any of those have a classic logo that represents them. Mercedes, BMW, right? Those logos are things that we see every day, and so I happen to pick VW here. I have no idea why. NBC, CBS, ABC, all the news broadcasting companies, right? Fox News, whatever it is that you watch, MTV, right? Chances are HGTV. That's the one I should have spit out, right? Because that's where we are here. All of those are very classic, iconic logos that brand that particular piece of TV, right? Rolling Stones logo, also very iconic, probably way over most of your age brackets. So some of us are a little bit older and might remember that. Most of you probably have no idea who they are. Anyway. Sometimes it's also about simplicity. and it's about the graphic recognition of this. And so if I were to go back a slide and I were to say, tell me about the Starbucks logo, my guess is that you wouldn't tell me that it has this weird lady with a crown and a star on it. You'd probably say, yeah, it's that green Starbucks logo. Right? You know it was green, and you see it all the time, but you don't really concentrate on it too much. If we really look into this logo, it's kind of interesting because there's a lot going on in this logo. It's actually a rather complicated logo, yet it's simple in the way that it kind of presents its normal form to us. Right? So one of the neat things about this is we actually have two circles. We have the circle that goes around the outside, and we have this circle that's on the inside. And there's probably some like graphic design theory about what this does to a particular neighborhood and the coffee house and the circles within circles and that sort of thing. But it doesn't really matter because we look at this very much as a graphic symbol. Right? We've got stuff going on the outside here. I don't even know what these things are. I mean, they're like wings or scarves or I don't know. What are they? Fins, okay, sure, why not? Kind of weird, okay? Does this have anything to do with coffee? No, it has nothing to do with coffee at all. Yet we all associate this with coffee. That's the power of branding. Okay, it's really kind of interesting. So it needs to be versatile, easy brand recognition of the logo. It has to be unique to do that. It has to be memorable, right? They always kind of have something that makes them unique as part of it. I'm going to throw some logos out there that you've never seen before just because they're kind of fun. Crocodile, cross between a crocodile and a hill. I think the logo reflects that really nicely. Kind of goofy, but at the same time kind of fun, kind of interesting. How about fish bomb? Kind of cool. Right? So the point is you can play with these kinds of words. You can use that to define what the logo is, or you could have a completely different logo for this kind of a thing. One of the big things is that you want a logo to be enduring. You don't want it to follow trends or fads. You want it to be something that you're going to use for a long period of time. And I think all too often designers get in trouble because they design something that's specific for a specific time. This goes back to the typography lesson when I talked about using papyrus as a font in the early 2000s. Real awesome, right? Everybody loved it. And now if you look at it, you're like, oh my God, that's so 2001 or whatever. Okay? So you want to be careful when you're designing it such that your design can last the duration of time. Okay? You want to make it future-proof in that you want to think about this 20 years from now, 50 years from now. Can that logo still exist? Right? Does it make sense for you as a company or you as an individual to have a logo and then to change it every year? Because as soon as you change it, you lose the brand loyalty. If Starbucks changed its logo every year, right, yeah, you would know what Starbucks is, but it wouldn't have the same brand loyalty to it. Right? You'd lose that association. And so a logo needs to be something that's going to last for a long period of time. So let's jump forward. Let's look at Apple Computer. Okay? If this first logo right here, which is, I know it's a little hard to see, right? If that was Apple's computer logo today, it would be a little weird, wouldn't you say? It has like a little picture of Isaac Newton sitting under a tree with an apple kind of, you know, the whole gravity thing, whatever, and it has this ribbon font of Apple Computer or whatever. Not the iconic graphic Apple symbol that we think of. Okay? So this particular logo was pre-1976 Apple Computer. So very early infancy of Apple Computer. They changed it then and lasted from 1976 all the way to 1998 with the iconic Apple with the rainbow colors. Okay? So all the old school stuff was that. And I don't know how many of you know the history of Apple Computer, but 1998 was the big turning point. They were seconds away from going under. And Steve Jobs came in, rescued the company, resurrected it, and kind of changed the brand as a whole from there. I would argue that if this there was the logo in 1998 when the company was tanking and about to go under, the company probably would have gone under. And the fact that they had that little bit of branding really made a big difference. So then we move forward, right? 1998 to 2000, Steve Jobs came back in, simplified things, got rid of the color schemes altogether, went with just the monochrome apple. Notice that the apple symbol is the same. It hasn't changed in proportion. Nothing about it has changed other than the color. After 2000, Steve Jobs was kind of reinventing Apple. You got the introduction of the iPod and kind of that whole line. So through the 2000s, they went with this really glossy, shiny, new, fancy Apple logo, right? So we get the gloss, we get the shine, we get the shadow. From 2007 on, it used to be 2007 to present, but they've changed it again. From 2007 on until about 2012 or so, 2013, this was the logo right here, which was a much more simplified, a little bit more elegant version of the shiny version that was the mid-2000s, the shiny version here. They stripped away a lot of that kind of shine and over-the-top gloss metallic to it, and went a little bit simpler, but still a little bit of drop shadow, a little bit of shine to it. So you can see how this is evolving, right? Then we step forward, and we look at the new Apple logo. Guess what? It looks almost exactly the same as the one from 1998. Kind of interesting that we go back on itself. But if the logo itself is so iconic that we recognize it and we have that brand recognition, the fact that they've changed through these logos in a variety of ways doesn't really matter. We still recognize the Apple, we still look at it. Okay? So you want to think about this enduring nature of a particular logo. So let's talk a little bit about the design process for creating a logo in the first place. So we start, this is almost the same as the graphic design process. You can see that there's some repetition in these lectures. We start with a design brief. And the design brief is obviously, hey, I want a logo. This is my company. This is what I want a logo for. This is kind of what I'm thinking about, etc. Then you as the designer have to move on into the research phase. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail as we go forward. Then we refer back to other things that have been done. We get into the major heavy sketching and conceptualization phase. That's where all our ideas come out. And then we get to reflection, looking at it. Does it look right? Asking your neighbors, asking other designers, is this a good logo? And then finally presenting it to the client. I had to throw in some goofy logos because I think they're kind of creative at the same time. So here is that in kind of a Venn diagram sort of thing. The brief is rather small. Then we get into research, little bit of reference, big sketching and conceptualization, lots of time at that area, a little bit of reflection. They include revisions on this particular chart because obviously there's revisions to the sketches and back and forth. This process right in here, if I can do this, is rather cyclical, right? You're going to keep going around and around and around and around and around and around in this general vicinity, okay, before you finally get to move on to this. So this is that design process that really takes quite a while. So if we separate each of these pieces out and we talk in a little bit more depth, we start with the design brief. So this is your opportunity to question the client about what is your company about, and this is obviously if you were designing for somebody else. For you guys today, you're designing a logo for yourself, so, well, it's really about you, so you can question yourself if you want. But what is it that you want? What's the intended purpose? How are you trying to brand yourself? What is it that you do that makes you you? And can you reflect that in a particular logo? You want to make sure that you include where it's going to be used, right? Maybe you're designing a logo because you want it to go on a t-shirt, right? Well, there's certain requirements to a t-shirt design and how large the logo can be and what it's going to look like and that sort of thing. Maybe it's going to be some kind of a logo that goes as part of a stationery. Maybe it's going to be on a business card. So where it goes is going to vary a little bit. Is the medium going to be in black and white, or is it going to be in color? Do you have access to color? Right? All of those are good, valuable questions. It's also a good time to talk about how much you're going to charge for this. This is obviously, you're doing it for somebody else. You guys today can really go to town with your negotiation on yourself about how much you're going to charge yourself for the logo that you're going to do, if you'd like to. Then we move into research. And I think one of the things that's really important about logo design is you have to know what else is out there, what looks good, what doesn't look good, what's trending, what's not trending, what's timeless, what's been successful. So what is your history, your personal history of a logo? A lot of you raised your hands when I asked you if you had a logo from 130. If you had a logo from 130, that's part of your history. Do you adapt that logo? Do you change that logo? Do you throw it out altogether like Apple did to their first logo and get a new logo? Right? You have to think about that. So you have to think about your own history. What other logos are used that are in a similar industry? So we're in the architectural realm here, or the design realm. So what do firms use? What does SOM's logo look like? Right? What does EHDD's logo look like? All those little pieces, You want to understand what those logos look like, and does your logo fit with that kind of industry standard? So you do that kind of research. What's the history of I already talked about logos. What are your competitors using for logos? If you were in 130, you saw a bunch of logos that different people did. Did you like anything that they were doing? Did you find something particularly successful? If so, how does that idea inform your own design process? Then you want to go into reference mode. And reference mode is a lot like research. The difference here is that you're just trying to get more ideas out. So if you do a Google search for logos, or a Google search for something slightly more specific than logos, you can go through and you can see all the logos that other people have done. And it can be very, very helpful to see that and to kind of think about it. You want to think about what the current styles are. So Johnny Ives from Apple in 2011, 2012-ish, iOS 7 was his big thing. He stripped away all the shadows and went flat UI, lots of flat colors, no more gradients. Right? That was a big shift and a big jump for a company to do because everything was shiny up until that moment. Right? Everything that we looked at was shiny. And he stripped all of that away and he said, no, we're going to go with a flat, very contemporary UI. And guess what? Everything has that UI now. Everything that we see is like that. And so it was a big change. And so that trend change is something that you want to think about. Do you reflect that in your design or do you not? The Digital Tools logo, right, still has the gradient on it. It's probably a little bit old-fashioned. I did it before this major shift. Should I switch it? Probably. And it's just something that you want to be aware of in this process. Do you switch it or do you not? Then we get into sketching and conceptualization. I told you this was the biggest phase. This is what you'll spend your time on today during your lab portion. And that is that you want to go through and develop your ideas, sketch out your ideas. Sometimes there's no better way of doing it than just sketching by hand. Right? Maybe you're comfortable on an iPad or some kind of a digital device with a stylus and you want to draw it out that way, that's fine. If you have a piece of paper, if you have a sketchbook, sometimes it's easy to kind of go through those ideas. Sometimes there's just nothing better than pulling up a piece of paper, maybe it's graph paper or something like that, and actually starting to draw out, oh, I think I'm going to do something that has a square and maybe it has a lowercase g on it, something like that, and it's like that, and then I'm going to fill this in. Or whatever, right? So you think through what are your conceptual ideas. Oh, maybe I didn't like that. Maybe there should be a G and there should be an A here. I don't know, right? You just work out your ideas, what feels right. And so whatever method or medium is right for you, you kind of work out those ideas and you show those in a better form as you develop those ideas. Wait. Let me figure out how to get out of that mode. There. All right. So let's look at a conceptualization. Right, this is not one that I did. This is something that I'm showing you that somebody else did. But it walks you through step by step from the abstract all the way through the final logo. So in this case, they wanted to do something with fingers and a fist or something along those lines. So they took a picture of this and they said, OK, what defines that fist? Okay? Well, it's essentially this in sketch form. Okay, but this is a little bit too loose and a little bit hard. There's some shadows. It's not really abstract enough to be a good logo. So let's take it another step further. Let's abstract it a little bit more into these ovals. And maybe there's stronger lines between the ovals. And so we're kind of taking it to the next step. Let's move it one step further. Maybe we abstract it into these ovals and then we add a little bit of shadow on those ovals. And then we take it a step further and we say, well, let's take it out of the sketching conceptualization phase and bring it into the world of Illustrator. And can I actually make this into an object? And how does that object start to come together? So I'll take the rectangle and I'll round the corners. And then I'll assemble the rectangles together to start to mimic this same kind of general idea. And then really it was turned kind of sideways. So I want to turn that sideways as well. Maybe from there, I need a little bit more around the thumb to make it stand out against the fingers. So I add a little bit of a gradient or something like that. And then we start to see what it really is turning into. So you can see all the way from that abstract photo that was in the beginning, now as it translates through into the final, quote, final logo. And so let's see. Maybe we need a little bit of text down below. So how do we add the text in? We have to think a lot about what the font should be and what it should look like as we put that together. And then we can start to see what it looks like in color, what it looks like in grayscale, and what it looks like in black and white. And a lot of times with the logo, you want to think carefully about what it looks like in these three mediums because you won't always be able to print in color. You might have the opportunity to, and it would be great to, but it might have to show it in black and white or in grayscale. So you want to think about all of those at once as you're doing this design. And then this is how it actually translated out to a set of stationery with a business card, etc. And you can see how that adapts across various pieces. Another example here, for a logo, a bunch of sketches trying to conceptualize what's going to work, what is this logo, what should it look like, etc. And then how does it start to translate into one of these forms. And so this has two different examples on it. We have kind of the Ultra 3D version up here at the top, right, that kind of loops through these various pieces. And then we have the ribbon down here at the bottom that is very much the folded look. So they're both very different, and you have to decide it's doing essentially the same thing, but which one do you like more? And how should it be kind of conceptually developed? So let's look at it as if we were drawing it in Illustrator. You guys are all very comfortable with the pen tool by now, I hope. Right? So you would set out these basic lines. They decided to go the direction of the three-dimensionality, so they added slightly different regions down below here to add that kind of shadow or relief to it. And then they started to play with colors and gradients to make this shape. And so obviously it's a flat shape, but by adding that little bit of a gradient, you can get the shadow that would be underneath parts of this little squiggle. Right? And we can see it a little bit closer there. It's really nicely done. Right? Took a lot of time to get those right. Then it's a complete discussion of what's the appropriate font. So fonts are very, very critical in a logo. They're usually very limited in what they say. Logos are not long, they're short. And the font that you use and how you track that particular font, what the letter forms look like, is very, very important. So here's an example comparing three fonts. They look almost identical, but they're subtly different. And so you as the designer want to make sure that you're choosing whichever one feels right for your particular design. So a lot of times it takes practice to decide which one looks right. They made this. They created objects out of the text so that they could use and manipulate those objects. And then it ultimately becomes the full logo. I think one of the nice things about this logo is we also have the color. We have the color version. We have what the color version would look like on a black background. Right? This must have something to do with film or something, so it would show up on a black background. And then they did a really nice job with the grayscale version of this as well. So the grayscale version, rather than just doing a translation into, hey, this is the color with the gradient and whatever, they instead added these little tiny lines that add the three-dimensionality to this logo without having to have any gradient. So it's become much flatter, much less muddled. We don't have to worry about the printing and is it going to really accurately portray the gradient or whatever in a grayscale mode. Those little subtle adds of those curves really makes a big difference. Then we get into the reflection phase. Right? This is where you have to step away from your work and you have to say, does it look good? Is it really coming across the way that I want it to? Is it portraying the message that I want it to portray? Those kinds of things. Because if you don't step back and think about that, you'll do this design in a vacuum. And this works the same way whether we're doing architecture, product design, industrial design, graphic design, or obviously logos. It doesn't really matter what we're doing. We always want to get second opinions. We want to get critique because that'll make our work better. So part of your exercise 115 today, one of the steps, and I think it's in part 3, I mandate that you turn to your neighbor. Hopefully you know your neighbor. If you don't, it's a good time to introduce yourself. And ask them, what do you think of my design? What do you think of my logo? Get some feedback on it. That's really, really important. Okay? You need to receive the feedback, let those ideas incubate, and then modify and adjust based on that feedback. Furthermore, you need the practice of giving the feedback in the first place. Because if you give the feedback, you have to articulate what's working and what's not working. And that helps you to learn what's working and not working in your own design. So it's all part of this design process. I think this is a particularly nice one, the River City Church. Kind of the open Bible with the river as the little ribbon that divides the book. It's really nicely done. Grab it. I love it. Half grab, half rabbit. And the logo somehow reflects that because you've got the hands and then you've got the negative of the rabbit. It's just, I don't know, it's a fun one. So if you can play with stuff like this, you can create a very iconic logo that's fun at the same time. This is a Japanese beer. I don't know that this logo really represents beer to me. If I were thinking about beer, this wouldn't be what I associate. But it goes across all of their product line, all the way to their business cards. And so that logo is definitely part of their branding of this particular craft beer. When we get to the presentation phase, it's about distilling down the best ideas and what really worked and what didn't work, showing the client or the person you're designing for what that best idea is, and then selling that best idea of this is the direction you should move. Right? If the client doesn't like it, guess what? You go back and you try again. That's the nature of design. Okay? The Mall of America logo is a particularly nice one. This is the traditional Mall of America logo. It's kind of this folded ribbon in a variety of colors. One of the things that the graphic designers did relating to this is they have a whole series of ways that this same vocabulary can be used depending on how you're trying to use the logo. Maybe it's seasonal. So across these stars in the middle here, we have the different seasons, 4th of July, Valentine's Day, and just the colors change. The logo's the same, and that adapts the logo for various times of the year, which is nice. It might also be about different ways of portraying it. We have the star in the upper left corner. Then we move across, and each of these logos say Mall of America, but there's slightly different ways of showing it. Right? And that can then adapt. It's in the same vocabulary for the particular use that they're going for. Down at the bottom are patterns that could be used as a backdrop for something else. So it's really a nice way of thinking about the different ways in which a logo could be used or adapted as part of the design process. So obviously you want to learn from others. What brands are particularly successful and why? The most successful brands have the simplest logos, and they've stuck with that logo. So things like Apple, things like McDonald's, things like Nike are all these extraordinarily successful logos because they're simple and they're obvious. Right? They've become part of that brand. Right? Who knows what the swoosh really is? It kind of doesn't matter. It doesn't have anything to do with shoes, but it is totally iconic representation of Nike. Right? So I would argue that it's extraordinarily successful. Then we get into typography. And so there are some logos that are graphically based. The Nike swoosh is a great example. Right? We don't even need to see the word Nike, and we know that that's Nike. On the other hand, some logos are driven entirely by the font or the text, and that font or text becomes the logo. Right? It's absolutely critical for these kinds of logos that the font be the right font and be very, very well done. One of the things you want to be careful of is the font itself going to go out of style? Is it easy to read? Right? All of those things play a big role. If you're designing based on a font, what is the right font? You have to go through lots and lots of iterations of fonts before you decide which one is really the right one. And that can be a chore to go through all of those various fonts. You may have to make your own font to get what you're really after, because it might just not exist already. And so you guys are familiar with that. Remember, if you're using a font, to think about loading a custom font if you want. Go find it online, bring it in, and use it. We've talked about how to do that. Certainly you guys did that in exercise 114. The little details really, really matter. The tracking between the letters, those kinds of things are critical if your font is going to be based on type. So let's look at some examples. Right? FedEx, IBM, Coca-Cola, right? You guys recognize these brands. They're very obvious brands. There's nothing to them other than the letters themselves. And the font of the letters is what's making the brand. Right? Things like CNN, Disney, NASA. Right? Disney is a very font-based thing. I mean, I argued for a long time that it should be Disney with a P because it doesn't look like a Y. Right? I was very confused as a kid why it was Disney. I didn't get it. So the point is that is it legible? Does it work? Obviously, it's Disney, and they've stuck with this font for a very long time. And despite kids being confused like myself, we somehow figured out that it's still Disney. So such is life, right? But NASA, been around for a long time. It looks a little, the NASA logo to me looks a little dated, looks a little 60s, 50s, 60s era. But at the same time, it's pretty clean and it works, and it's certainly NASA, right? It's branding for NASA. Okay, so let's take a closer look at FedEx, right? You ready to have something pop out at you that you might not have seen? The people this morning totally ruined it because they knew what this was, right? The FedEx logo has a hidden little gem in it, right? There's an arrow right in the middle of FedEx. And if you've never seen that before, now every time you look at FedEx, you're going to see the arrow. Right? It's one of those great things that you never saw before and that you see after the fact, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. But that's part of what makes FedEx such a great logo. It's type-based, yet it has this little hidden thing. Right? It's kind of like the Grabbit logo with the two hands and the rabbit in between. It's just a fun little added bonus to a particular logo. And I would argue that FedEx is one of the best well-done logos out there because of this little extra nugget. Sometimes it's font-based, dynamic dust here, with a little bit of extra. So it's really very much about the font. It's the combination of the thin font and the thick font for how they go together. Notice there's no space. The words just run together, but just because one is bold and one is not in their style makes all the difference. I really like this one. I think this is a typeface designer, so it's particularly appropriate, but it's just somehow it's very clean, and it works really, really nicely as a logo. So the other thing that we want to do as part of the logo design process is to avoid the cliches, avoid the clip art, right? If you go into Word and you pick the globe because you're doing an international company, well, that's a known piece of clip art. It's just not that great. Right? It doesn't make your logo special. You want your logo to be special. No light bulbs for ideas, no globes for international, right? Those kinds of things are done. Right? Those are the kinds of things that you see in some kind of, back of the napkin home business. Somebody just needed to throw some logo together. Right? Take your time. You guys are designers. Make a real logo. If you copy another logo, it will be totally obvious. Right? If you did a swoosh that was backwards, everybody like, why'd you draw why are you Nike backwards? Because we're so brand loyal and we're so well associated. If you did an apple without the bite taken out of it, everybody would be like, why'd you butcher the Apple logo? Because it becomes so iconic and so tied to a brand, you can't repeat. You have to do something different. You have to do something unique. Right? Doesn't mean that you can't look at other ideas and think about it, but at the same time, you have to be careful. Right? Logos have to be unique to be successful. When we get to actual output files, we're going to start today with a 1500 pixel by 1500 pixel Illustrator file as a base. Remember, because it's a because it's a vector graphic, we can scale it up and we can scale it down. It doesn't make any difference. So we'll start at 1500 by 1500. We'll do an 800 by 800 export. We could do something small at 16 pixels by 16 pixels. And it would all work together. We could shrink these and enlarge these. Right? We always want to make sure that we save the Illustrator file, the .ai file, as part of our package. And we also want to think about black and white, grayscale, and color. Do we need to change the versions based on those? I'm only asking you for one logo today. You don't have to adapt yours for black and white or for color. But at the same time, if you're doing your logo, you want to have that in the back of your mind, kind of thinking about it. So just a variety of other examples that I think work very nicely. Font-based, but it's kind of none of these are actual letters, right? They're shapes that remind us of letters, which is kind of interesting. Right? The paperclip cloud, kind of interesting. Nicely done. I don't know why I like this one. It's totally silly, but it's kind of funny. So you could get access to a lot of these. If you do Google search, you can come up with, there's lots and lots of logos. But at the same time, the best logos are just ones. One of my favorite logos of all time, I went ice climbing in Switzerland. And the guy that I went ice climbing with, I bought a t-shirt and it had a spider on the back. It was an ice climbing, I don't know, somehow related. And it was like the coolest logo ever. Like I just loved it. And it was some dude in Switzerland that like came up with it. I don't know, kind of fun. These are all iconic logos. You've seen them before, right? No surprise. Again, very simple, very clean, very classic, and very brand loyal. I like this one. I think it's kind of interesting because it has movement in it. And a lot of the successful logos do have movement. One more set of conceptualizations. In this particular design, these were the sketches that led to this. Again, not my design, just one that I found online. But I think it's a good way of looking through it. The company was Jigsaw Internet, and how do you adapt Jigsaw Internet? Obviously, Jigsaw Puzzle is related, but how do you really put that together as part of this? And so these were a variety of ideas that came together. Then they started to model the kind of 3D model. This must have been in the early 2000s. Right? Everybody was into the Google eBay color scheme of the multiple colors. That was just the way things worked at that time frame. Maybe that wasn't quite right, so they toned it back into the different colors. Font's not really that great. It's kind of okay, right? Take it a step further. Okay, this is looking a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more what we would be looking for now. A little bit cleaner font, bold, not bold, working together with the little jigsaw pieces, and then they ended up with their kind of final version of the two with one of the letters taken away with the puzzle pieces. right? And then how it looks on a set of business cards. So thinking about the product or the logo all the way through the design process. Okay, so we're going to move from the slides over, and I'm going to show you some Illustrator examples. So bear with me for just a second while I switch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up Illustrator. And thus far, I've already given you files, so we've never created a new file from scratch. So this time, we're actually going to go through and create a brand new file. So I'm going to go to File, New, if the little splash screen doesn't show up for the new document. Sometimes this shows up by default. If it doesn't, File, New. I'll give my document a name here. And under this artboard section, we don't really worry about that. Artboards are kind of a complicated thing that Illustrator does that have to do with the variety of outputs that you can create. For right now, we just have one artboard, so that's fine. Down here under size, you can tell that I did this already this morning. There are the presets that we're used to, letter, tabloid, etc. We want it to be 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels. Notice that my units are in pixels because I'm designing a logo. And I'll do 1500 by 1500. Just like in InDesign, I do have the ability to do bleed. I'm not going to worry about it for right now. And then under Advanced, we can adjust the color mode, etc. I will talk at length about colors and color mode when you guys get back from break. I'll take this opportunity to remind you again that I'm being reviewed that Monday when we get back. So please show up. Please be here on time so that you guys can fill out the surveys and all the rest of it. That evaluate me. Obviously, that's something that's important to me because I want to have good classes and I want you guys to enjoy being here and to learn a lot. So that kind of feedback is critical to the whole system and making sure it works. So if you'd be here, that would be great. OK, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And I'm going to get a document that is 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels. And I'll start working on layer 1. I'm going to end up creating a lot of layers today so that I can kind of go through a variety of design ideas in the process. So I've gone ahead and I've set up with the Essentials ribbon. So I'll make sure that that's checked. I'm going to reset it so that it's at its default setup so that it matches yours. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to create the logo. And so you guys saw I was doing a few little sketches. One of the ones that I'll do is a square with a hole cut out of it. Another one that I'll do will be type-based, and we'll kind of see how those to play off each other. So let's start with the square one. Okay, so I'm going to click on this rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a square. Now, I could create the square that is the full size of this sheet, which ultimately maybe I will. But for right now, I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. And also, if I want it to be a perfect square, if I hold down Shift, it'll stay in proportion at that square. And recognize that once I create this square, I can also choose to adjust the size of it after the fact. So it looks like right now I have a white fill and a black stroke. I want the fill color, we'll make it red. And the stroke color, I want to be nothing. Okay, so there's no stroke assigned to it. It's just a color square. And then I'll go ahead and use the text tool, and I'll create a letter. So I said I was going to use the letter G, so I will. And it's selected. I need to adjust the size of that letter up. It's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 500. Oh, it's still not big enough. Probably needs to be a little bit bigger than that. Let's do 750. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And I'd also like to go through and adjust based on the fonts, which font looks right. Obviously, picking something like Old English is going to be very, very different than picking something contemporary. And so you might have to play around with what's the right look. And it may take you several versions to decide what really is working for you. So depending, maybe it's that. I don't know. Definitely not that one. And so sometimes it just takes time of kind of playing around with what looks right. Definitely not that. Sorry, that was not what I meant to pick. Nope. Go back to that first one. OK, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have this overlapping the square, and I'm going to put an extra little rectangle behind in the interest of explaining what's kind of happening here. Oops. Yeah, okay, those colors turn out okay on the screen. I'm going to right-click and go to Arrange, Send to Back, so that it goes behind my other objects. So I set this up with these colors just so that you can see how the Pathfinder tool works. And so the next piece of this is I'm going to bring up something called the Pathfinder tool. And I can do that by going to Window, Pathfinder. And it'll bring up this little floating dialog box that says Pathfinder. And it'll have shape modes and pathfinders. We're going to start with the shape modes, and then I'll go through what's happening at each one of these. Okay? So before we get into pathfinders, I do have to convert this from a text object into an object that's based on its curves. So let me go ahead and go up to Type, and I'm going to go to Create Outlines, so that this becomes not a live text object, but an actual object. And then I'll select the G, and I'll also select the red square as the two pieces that I have selected. And then I'll come over to the Pathfinder tools, and I'll start with the first one, and I'm going to walk through what each one of these does. So the first one is called Unite, and what it does is it joins these two together into one shape. So when I click Unite, right, the whole thing turns black because the object that was on the top is black, and it adds the piece that's overlapping here to the square. So they become one unit. Okay? If instead I did the next one, which is Subtract, or minus front, it would take out or cut out the G from the square. And see how I can see through it. If I were to move this over, right, it is a fully transparent object. Right there. If instead I went to the third option, it would leave just the part where the two objects overlap. So I end up with only this piece. So you can see how I can kind of work depending on which Pathfinder tool or which shape mode I use. I can get very, very different results. The last one is going to eliminate just the part where they overlap. So I have the logo with this cut out, but then it's continuous over here. So obviously, depending on where it goes, that logo follows. Now, if we move down into the shape mode, or excuse me, the Pathfinders, right? These are very, very similar to the shape modes. The difference is that instead of unifying it into one object, it actually creates separate objects. So this divide here is a lot like the Unite, except that I get separate objects. And I can access those separate objects by clicking on the white arrow, which is the Direct Select tool, and then selecting the individual pieces. So you can see that it's split this into individual little pieces. Okay? If we jump back to there, and I go to this next one, this is called Trim. And Trim does something very similar to Divide, except it keeps the object that is on top, excuse me, here, as its own object, but it divides the lower object. So it's a lot like, notice that these fall in columns here, it's a lot like minus front, except that you get to keep the front. So you don't get rid of the front. All right, so let's go back. There we are. The next one here is Merge, which didn't do anything. Hold on. Gonna merge. There we go. And we get, again, oops, separate pieces. There. Back up. One more. There we go. And once again, I'll select these two objects. We'll get to this one, which is Crop, which gives us just this piece. And then we can get to some of these other ones. The Outline mode will create outlines of your objects if you wanted to. And this one, the minus back, would subtract the back from the front. I don't quite understand the value of minus back, if I'm being honest. I've never, ever used it, but it exists and is something that you could do where you could take away the back from the front. All right? So now that I've gotten there, and we've kind of gone through the Pathfinder tools, the first logo that I was going to create was the G. This was the one that I sketched, and I want that G to line up right along this edge here. Something like that. And I'm going to subtract the front from the back. So here's my object in front, here's my object in back, and I'm going to use the shape mode minus front to cut that particular object out. And so now I have a square logo that has the G removed from it, and this acts just as a, oops, sorry, I meant to select it with the black arrow instead. This acts as a logo. I can come over here to the transform tools, free transform, and I can make this whole object bigger or smaller. Remember, no matter how large I make it, it's not going to get distorted because it's a vector graphic. It's mathematically defined. Right? And I can end up with this final version of my object. Maybe I want there to be an extra little box that goes around it. Oops, not yet. Let me drag a box, maybe something like this. And we'll put a little line around it, and we'll up the thickness of the line. Something like that. And that could be one example of a logo. Okay. Maybe instead of doing that, I wanted a different logo, so I'll create a new layer. We'll turn this off, and I'll use a couple little text lines. So I'll do a G, and I'll do an A. And I'll put these two together. Again, I'm going to create outlines from them. So I'll go to Object, Create Outlines. Oops, excuse me, Type, Create Outlines. And then I need a line that goes between the two. Maybe I'll put a vertical line in like that. And I'd like that vertical line to be red. I have no idea why I'm picking red as the color for right now, but we'll talk about color theory a little bit later. And maybe that becomes an example of a logo. Maybe I want it to be all font based. So maybe it's, let's make that a little bit smaller here. Maybe, let's see here, let's make this. This is not the right font because I need something with a font family that I can get thinner. I don't know, maybe I'll do it like that. And I'll nest the two together, and somehow that becomes part of it. Maybe this lower one needs to be the color. I don't know. You know, the point is that I'm playing around with ideas. And this might be the font base. Maybe one of these is a different font from it. I don't think these particularly go together, but the idea is that I can keep playing around with these ideas until I get something that looks right. Maybe these then need to be subtracted from the square. Maybe I need those to be part of a rectangle, so let's use the rectangle here. Like that. Let me send this to the back. Arrange, send to back. Let me take all three of those, and we'll go to my Pathfinders, and we'll subtract. Maybe not. Oh, I have to convert these to objects first, sorry. Object, text, type, create outlines. There, minus, and now that gets cut out of a square. So the point is I'm playing around with those. So I'm not limited to text and rectangles. If I would rather do something with other shapes in it, there's nothing wrong with doing, say, a circle. So I'm using the ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold down Shift as I create it. And now I have a circle. Something like that. Maybe I want to draw my own shape inside of this. Maybe it's a polygon, for example. I'll draw a polygon. Let me change the color of this so you can see how they interact. I'll put this over so that they line up on each other like that. And then maybe I'll subtract this one from this one, for example. So I could take these two Pathfinders, subtract, and I end up with kind of the bolt-looking thing. And maybe the text of my initials or something goes there. Maybe I want this shape to have a bit of a gradient to it. So thus far, everything that I've done fits within the trend of the the graphic design style that is a very flat UI, but maybe I do want there to be a gradient. So if I take this object that I just created, and I come over here, and on the right side there's a little gradient button, I can choose the type of gradient that I want. So in this case, it's going to be radial, because I want it to feather a little bit. And maybe I want it to start black and end white, something like that. And depending on where I do it, and maybe it's something like that, it's almost like a spray paint or a drop shadow. So I'm playing around with that and kind of how those pieces come together to create this particular object. Maybe I want there to be another circle that goes around the outside of it. Let me hold down Shift to make sure that that's in proportion. I didn't want there to be a fill. I wanted there to be a stroke. And I didn't want the stroke to be anything but a color. And let's increase the size or the weight of that. Now I want to point out something else that you have the ability to do. So in the stroke menu here, if I show my options, one of the things that we didn't talk about was this align stroke option. And so what happens in align stroke is by default it's set to the center. So you can see my green line runs around the center and the stroke width goes on either side of it. But I can choose to have my green line, right, go around the outside such that all of the stroke is on the inside of the line, or I can choose to have the opposite where all of the stroke is on the outside of the line. So I have flexibility in how this is applied, okay, which is something that's important to recognize here in the menu. So we also could create something. Thus far I've done everything as shapes, but I could create something entirely from scratch, just like, say, the Twitter logo was created with a bird. I could come up with some other logo based on something. And so therein lies our use of the pen tool. And so maybe I wanted to draw a screwdriver, for example. So I could start with the handle. We can make this a little bit bigger. Come back here. Obviously, my width is way too big. Let's do it as a fill instead. And then maybe it needs to come out, and it needs to become some kind of a handle or something. I don't know. This is a horribly ugly bent screwdriver, but whatever. The point is that now I could come back in and I could start to work with the same kinds of things that we've been working with. I could convert that to angular so it's sharp. Right? I could adjust it. I should have done it straight first and then rotated it after the fact. But I can start to tweak this such that it feels appropriate for the screwdriver. Something like this. Obviously, the handle needs to adjust. If I was unhappy with the handle, remember, I can use those Pathfinder tools to my advantage. I could even use a pen tool to create a shape that cuts this off. Show you here. Say, you know what? I didn't really like this whole piece. So let me take both of these objects here, and I'm going to use Pathfinder, and I'm going to subtract the front from the back. Okay, now I just have this piece, and I could come back and start with, say, a rectangle to represent the handle, and then I could rotate that until it felt right. I could put these two together, something like this, and then I could take these two, whoops. Sorry, it's trying to tell me that I was in the wrong place. And I could take these two, and then I could come back to the Pathfinders, and I could add them together. So you see how I can quickly subtract and add shapes together to get whatever the final version is that I want. Maybe I wanted to add something more to the handle. I wanted to put text on the handle. You guys see how this all starts to come together. So don't be afraid of trying to draw something. Obviously, you'll do a better job than I will at creating this. The one other thing that people have a tendency to want to do, and I think this is definitely more on the advanced side of things, but sometimes people create a variety of shapes. Let me make this as an outline, a line, and then I'm going to copy it and paste it several times so that it's on top of itself. and then maybe I'll draw a few more lines that go through it. Okay, so they create something like this that's kind of a complicated shape, and they'd like to fill in certain regions of this particular shape so that it has a fill color associated with it. I can do this very, very easily in something like Photoshop because I could select that region and then fill it in with the paint bucket tool. Well, Illustrator has a similar paint bucket tool. It's called the Live Paint tool, and it looks for lines that intersect and contain closed places, and it will let you fill those in with a particular color. When I do this, I always recommend that people duplicate the layer before they do it. So I'll right-click on the layer, or excuse me, I'll click on the little flyout, and I'll say Duplicate Layer. Gives me 2 copies, and then I'll work on one or the other of them and turn the other one off. So it's a good backup plan so that I can go back. I'll take my lines, I'll select them all, and I'll come over, and underneath this Shape Builder tool is something called the Live Paint Bucket tool. Or I can press K to get there. And when I move my cursor over this shape, when I click, it'll let me go through and highlight any of these individual pieces, and then I can fill those pieces with a particular color. So I can pick my color, and then I can start to fill them in, depending on which parts of this I wanted to have filled in. Right? Which can be a good way of creating this kind of dynamic object. So I like to introduce that to you. We'll spend a lot more time in a couple lectures talking about how to use this and how to really make it work. We'll even spend more time towards the end of the semester after the AutoCAD section to use this to highlight certain areas of an AutoCAD drawing. So it's not by any means the last time that you'll see it. It tends to be one of the more complicated pieces to try to learn in Illustrator because there are certain steps that have to happen for it to work. But at the same time, I like to at least show you that it exists so that you can start to think about it and whether it's appropriate for your particular logo or not. Okay? So I think I've covered everything you kind of need to be able to see and do for today's logo exercise. Please take your time. Remember, as part of these steps, you do have to lean over. It's part 3. Ask your neighbor what they think, get some feedback, and then adjust your design based on the feedback that they give you. Or maybe refute the feedback that they give you and tweak it in your own direction. The point is you should get some feedback. Are there any questions? No? I will take this opportunity to wish you a very happy spring break. I know you probably have 1 day left, but in terms of my life, this is the end. So take your time, create a good logo, and then have a wonderfully fantastic spring break.